Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 3:30. I think we have an hour. So thank you everyone for coming. This is about the land buyback. The description in the program was last year's description. I don't know how they got it switched, but it'll be some of the similar stuff, and we can answer all the questions. But I also wanted to, I'll talk about it in a second, but have a discussion about fractionation and the future of fractionation. But just as a short introduction, my name is Julius Snell, and then we also have Albert Olgas, works with the appraisers with the Appraisal Valuation Services Office. And he'll talk about that a little bit, but we also want to just talk about the program. But my background, I think in 2012 I was working with BIA Realty in DC, and 2014 I went over to the buyback program as a program analyst. So working with the data, the names and addresses of where folks are located, mapping, developing maps for the program. And then now I'm a tribal relations advisor working with the tribes to implement the program. So just, I work with the tribe about a year. I work with our federal partners, BLM, the Appraisal Valuation Services Office now, OST, BIA, who else? I think that's most of the major ones. And so just been doing that for the last 4 years now. And so as you'll hear, we'll be winding down soon. We're pretty successful and running out of money. And so that's kind of the big thing to remember today. Originally got interested in Indian lands from a friend back at Osage. She was living on fractionated land, just kind of didn't understand how she got it or where it went actually. So they were allotted, I think, 640 acres originally. And, I think their family was down to, 150 or 200 or so. And so she just didn't know. She grew up, she'd always have to go to the BIA with her mom, but didn't really pay attention. And then her mom passed away. And so she just really wanted to understand, what was going on with her land, or how she got it, or what happened to it, or how did these people end up on their land that was originally their allotment. And now there's these people they don't even know, or, they're neighbors, but they don't really know them. That's how long it's been since the land went out of trust. So she was just curious about that. And so I was helping her just kind of understand that as well. So just kind of self-taught, or not luckily, but in Oklahoma, you can go to get the records at the county court. And so we just went and pulled everything we could and just started reading everything we could. And then actually the first tribal land conference came up back in Vegas, was I guess 9 years ago. And we went, we paid our own way to go. We weren't tribal land staff. We were just interested in the land and just interested in meeting other folks. And so after that, that's when I got hired by BIA eventually. And then just now here I am. So I presented the last couple of years. But yeah, like I said, we're winding down. I'll let Albert do an introduction when it's his section in a few minutes. But this is what we wanted to talk about today. Just give you some of the background. I'm assuming everyone kind of knows about the buyback program now. Present some current results. We do currently have an implementation schedule, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll turn it over to Albert to talk about appraisal sharing. And then I have some statistics about fractionation that I think people are interested in. A lot of people don't get to see kind of the bigger picture of what's going on with fractionation or what might happen. But working with the program and working with the department, I have access to a lot of this data. And so I'll share some of that with you. And then I'm interested in hearing from you guys, just, how does fractionation affect you? What are some possible solutions that maybe your tribe works with or you think about, or what could we do in the future? And so what are some, hopefully get some input that maybe I could take back to the department and say, hey, this is what the the tribal land staff thought would be a good idea. And so just kind of want to start that conversation. And I think we'll continue to have that conversation because we know we're not going to solve fractionation. We know we're running out of money. We know there's still a lot of interest out there, in fractional interests that are out there. So hopefully get that input from you guys, so don't be too shy to chat with us. We also have a mic, so I guess we'll have to run it over to you. Or we have a, okay. So we have someone that'll run the mic over to you, so when you have a question, and feel free to ask a question at any point, and so we can get on the camera. So what is the program? This is kind of the basics. Implements the Cobell Settlement Agreement. Originally in 2012, there was $1.9 billion to purchase fractional interest in trust or restricted land at fair market value from willing sellers within a 10-year period, which began in 2012. And so then we purchase the interest and then hold those in trust for the tribe with jurisdiction over the land. So that's how we function. As of March 1 of this year, we have approximately $354 million left. And so that's out of the $1.9 billion, some of that was slated for scholarships, some of it was slated for implementation costs, and then some to purchase those interests. And so total, we have $354 million left in about, 2022, 3 years, a little less than 3 years, I guess, to either spend the money and put myself out of a job or go till November 2022. And then whatever's left over, hopefully there won't be anything left over, but if there is anything left over, it'll go back to the Treasury per the settlement agreement. This is what the law says. So program results, these are the latest and greatest. We've mailed offers to landowners with interest at 51 locations, consolidated more than 838,000 interests on nearly 45,000 tracts. The 2.4 million equivalent acres transferred to the tribes. So that includes surface resource code tracts, both resource code tracts and mineral only resource code tracts. And increased tribal ownership to greater than equal to 50% in more than 15,800 tracts. And so that's significant because now the tribes have basically the main say of what happens, at least for like ag and range leases, when they have this, when they reach the 50%. And then they could do businesses or residential depending on the regulations and what they're trying to do and how many interests are left over. So as far as the implementation cost, we've expended 36% of the 285 million. So that was, out of that 1.9 billion, there was 285 that we could use to spend on implementation cost, generating the offers, doing the mapping, doing the appraisals, paying the staff salary. We're a really small office, so we've been able to, spend this money pretty cost effectively, and hopefully have money left over that we can then transfer over to the land consolidation fund and continue to buy more interest. But we are running out of time, and so it does take time to implement at a reservation. And so as we move forward, we'll either be running out of money or running out of time. We just don't know right now what's going to happen at the end. We've also entered into agreements with 51 tribes. And those are the cooperative agreements where we provide funding. That comes out of the implementation cost to provide landowner outreach to the landowners of their tribe or the reservation we're implementing on, or a memorandum of agreement where the tribe just agrees to share information and maybe assist, but no funding changes place. And so that 51 tribes those agreements consist of both majority, I don't know, maybe there was 4 or 5 that were MOAs. Most were cooperative agreements where we provided the funding for the tribe to do landowner outreach. So coming up through winter 2020, so We have a new administration. A couple of years ago, they asked us to look into how can we maximize what's left of the fund? How can we purchase the most interest with what we have left? So it was a little shift in strategy in how we operated. And so we released, I think, a schedule of 20 at that time, I guess about 2 years ago now. And so we've implemented it some places. So we just got done with Pine Ridge, Rosebud, Northern Cheyenne, Crow. Maybe Crow has a few more offers outstanding. Santee Sioux, we just finished, and I think that's it. So currently, there's offers for Fort Belknap and Fort Berthold. Next will be Fort Peck. Those might be going out next week or pretty soon. And then we have the rest of the locations basically from now until next year. So this is what we have. We don't know how much money we're going to spend, because we've already been to some of these locations. I think most of them, all of them except for Boys Fort and Wind River. So we don't know exactly how much the return rate will be. Some have been, we predicted or estimated it might be about 20%. So like at Pine Ridge, maybe at the first initial implementation a few years ago, maybe they were at 40%. And this time maybe they're at 20-something%. And so, and the reason being is we've already sent a lot of people offers the first time, and they didn't sell for whatever reason that time. And so why would they sell again? So obviously some did that, got their offers last time, and now they decided to sell for whatever reason. But we estimated that it would be less. And so for these larger reservations, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Crow was almost the exact same, somewhere 50%, 60% return rate. So Crow was, they were really excited about buyback. So we just don't know what's going to happen. So moving forward after 2020, locations will be added as capacity and resources allow. And so we're not going to announce a schedule like we did initially with the 20 reservations. We'll just be contacting those tribes individually. And at some point, we'll be contacting tribes, and, maybe we don't get to the offer part. Maybe we get to the mapping, maybe we get to the appraisals, maybe we start doing landowner outreach. But at some point, the last tribe, maybe we run out of money and just can't send those offers. So when we are announced, or when we go to each location, location by location, we're going to let them know, like, hey, we're going to start this work, but it's also, we have to caveat it that it's possible that we may not even get to the offer time. We estimate that we will, but we just don't know for sure. And so we don't want to put out a schedule and, disappoint a lot of tribes. So the tribes will be contacted individually. But for these tribes that are going, and then for the tribes going into the future as we contact them, one of the things that came out, or one of the things we've been working on that tribes had asked us for, and landowners, is to share the appraisals. So if you're from any of these tribes and you don't want to sell, you might still be interested in receiving that statement of value, or the appraisal if it's a site specific, to do co-owner purchases, or the tribes might be interested. We share those with the tribes. And so I'll turn it over to Albert to talk about the appraisal sharing, and then maybe do a quick introduction. So we have to talk through the mic if you want to come over.
Is my turn up?
Yeah. Your name's Albert, right?
For today.
Yeah. So we just have to talk through here. And then
Hello, everybody.
there's your 3 slides.
Yep, thank you. My name is Alberto Olgas. I am a Native American, but I'm imported from south of the border. So I'm an appraiser, have been an appraiser for longer than I care to remember. Longer than most of you have been born, probably. And I'm the supervisory appraiser with responsibility over the mass appraisal effort for the buyback program. It's my first time working for the feds. It has been a very interesting and rewarding experience. And quite frankly, the most rewarding part of it, I always say that as public employees, public servants, if you will, it is always a privilege to be able to do the type of work that we do because we get paid for helping others. And that's a unique privilege. But at the same time, I have to tell you, I've been around the block a number of times. I'm not a young guy. And I have had the pleasure of working with some of the brightest young individuals that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Most of them Native Americans, which is something that I had never been exposed to. But there is a tremendous harvest, I think, of future leaders that everybody in this room ought to feel quite proud of. I think that things are going quite well in that regard. So in any event, enough talking about myself. I'm going to talk about appraisal sharing. There's been a memorandum of understanding between BIA, AVSO, Department of Interior, in terms of how these appraisals are going to be shared and what was the protocol that needs to be followed in case somebody, a property owner, comes and wants a copy of their appraisal that was prepared for buyback program purposes. Now, the purpose of this memorandum of understanding is to encourage the use of these appraisals for non-buyback purposes. It is difficult to get appraisals throughout Indian country, and so these appraisals are there to the extent that they can be put to good use. The leadership is basically encouraging everybody, please use them to the extent that you can use them. So the program is committed to maximizing the responsible use of these appraisals and has determined that copies will be shared with landowners, with tribal nations, and with regional BIA offices. Now, there's two paths to get copies of these appraisals. The landowner can go directly to TBCC. What does TBCC stand for? Trust Beneficiary Call Center. Thank you. So they can go directly to the TBCC. It's nothing more than a simple phone call. They will vet that the caller is actually one of the actual owners of the property, and they will log it into the computer system. It will go to the buyback program valuations office, the appraisers, and they will submit a copy of that appraisal, whether it's a single property appraisal or a statement of value, which is what we call the product of a mass appraisal work. They will submit a copy of that document to TBCC. TBCC will send it over to the property owner, the requester. So quite frankly, if I'm to sit here and tell you what the company line is, there's two routes to get a copy of your appraisal. Talking between friends, I'm telling you, encouraging the property owner to go directly to the TBCC is probably the quickest way to get it. Option two is the landowner goes to the BIA, their local BIA office, and requests this appraisal. The local BIA office would have to enter a request into OASIS, which is the appraisal tracking system that the former OAS has. And that request enters there, gets sent to the local appraisal office. The local appraisal office requests a copy from our buyback appraisal office. We send it back to them, or they can actually get it out of OASIS. But I'm telling you, it might not necessarily be in OASIS yet, and that's why it's much quicker to go directly, or have the landowner go directly to TBCC. Try to say that quickly 50 times. So anyway, those are the two routes. So in order to encourage the use of these appraisals, the effective age, if you remember at the beginning of the program, the appraisals were considered to be valid for 9 months. So that appraisal could be put to use for 9 months. And there was a lot of feedback from Indian country. There was a lot of feedback, quite frankly, from us, the appraisers, to the program, encouraging them to extend that validity period to a minimum of 12 months. There's no reason why these appraisals, all things being equal, cannot be used for a 12-month period, provided that the market has been relatively stable. If the market has been very active and things are changing, then the appraiser is going to be the first one to advise the program and says, hey, you might consider not using these appraisals anymore because things have dramatically changed. But that is the exception rather than the rule, and that's why we encouraged all along a 12-month validity period. So the purpose is to provide for tribal purchases, to provide for co-owner purchases wherever the appropriate market conditions are in place. Now, buyback program, of course, recognizes that market value can change as soon as an offer is made, or that it may remain static. Continual reassessment of these market values is untenable given limited timeframes and funds, and thus the administrative validity period. It will allow for timely implementation at each location in terms of buyback program efforts, and it will set a date for property appraisals to be reevaluated if warranted. So I think I've covered most of what I'm supposed to cover. Where did Julius go? Oh, I thought you were hiding, man. You wanted me to do the rest of your presentation. So we'll open up later for after he's done, in case there's anybody that wants to discuss appraisals or things like that. If you guys want to throw tomatoes, go in that direction. And thank you.
Thank you, Albert. So we made him come out here for 15 minutes. So thank you, Albert. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was just current fractionation. So like I was saying earlier, we have lots of statistics about what's going on. This will continue to be an issue. So I'm hoping that maybe we could start the discussion, or maybe you've already talked about it with folks at your locations, to think about fractionation, how it affects you, how it affects your tribe or just your family. But so currently there's approximately 150 locations that have nearly 100,000 fractionated tracts, and more than 243,000 landowners own approximately 2.5 billion fractional interests. This 2.5 million are the interests that are eligible for the program. So we're excluding joint tenancy interests that are in probate, minors, non-compos mentis. So I think there's another 500,000 or so interest. We'll have, so I think there's 500,000 interests that aren't included in this number. So these are the ones that were eligible for the program for how we purchase fractional interest. So nearly 98% of these are less than 25% ownership. So if we want to think about what might happen into the future, I don't know if some of you were in the April ones earlier. I was really interested in those and learning more about APRA. It's a little complicated, but I think remembering this 5% rule that they have, or a single air rule, so 88% of those 2.5 million fractional interests are less than 5%. So I don't know what that 88% is, but and subject to the single heir rule. So these 88% of the 2.5 million are probably not going to fractionate. Most people don't write a will, and there are some, and the lady was talking earlier that people will come in with 0.0005, I don't even know if that's the percent, but that's their interest size, and want to split it further. And the reason she said, and I asked some other folks, is that the person wants to be fair to the kids, so we're going to give you an even tinier amount just to be fair, or they don't want the kids to be fighting. And so if they write a will for this 0.0005, it can still fractionate. But from what we've seen is, not, I don't know, maybe 1% or less write a will to do that. So most of these 2.5 million fractional interests are not going to fractionate further. It goes to the single eligible heir, so it's just going from one person to the next. So it's not fractionating, but that the tracking still has to happen, at least on the department side. The consent requirements that the BIA has to gather is still there, but it's just not fractionating further when it's that less than 5% and the person passes without a will. So there's the remaining 12% of the 2.5 million that are greater than or equal to 5% in size. So those are the ones that can further fractionate. So if you're 6%, 3 kids, each kid gets 2% and doesn't go any further after that unless those people decide to write a will and split it further. So it's just kind of up to them. So we know that these interests that are greater than or equal to 5% will continue to fractionate. Here it is, 241,000 interests. So if we, think it's going to go to 3 different heirs, we don't know what the correct assumption is as far as how many heirs there should be. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But say we assume 3 heirs, we're back up to, I don't know, what is that, 700, 800,000 or so. So basically just kind of erasing what the buyback program did if people don't have a will for these 5% interests or greater than equal to 5% interest. So this graph here shows that, the majority are between 5 and 10%. Can't see it on my screen. And then 10 to 15% after that, and then a lot of the interest are, smaller, or they're bigger, but there's less of them. So yeah, that's just what's happening or what's out there now, is that these will continue to fractionate. And so it's an issue for the department because the department has to track these. It's an issue for consent requirements. So the land is still, idle or BIA has to manage it and try to, do a leasing auction or whatever they do. So these people, if they don't want to sell to the program, or if we're not going there for whatever reason, they'll just continue to fractionate. And so we're kind of back to where we started. We spent 1.9 billion, but then now we're, if these 241,000 continue to fractionate, which they will, most of them will, and, then we're just back to square one. So it's just going to continue to be an issue, with technology. Yeah, maybe we can track it, but is that going to help the landowners? Is that going to help the tribe try to do something with that land? So we know there's 20 owners, but it's, it's hard to get the consent to do anything with that. So the next thing I wanted to do is just start the discussion. What happened to our microphone? So, these are just questions I thought of to ask. How does fractionation impact your tribal lands? What strategies do your tribe use to manage or reduce fractionation? Or if it's a family, maybe there's some strategies. I think we heard some, if anybody was in the last one, talking about trust or family trust or corporations of somehow coming together to manage these fractional interests. And then if you have suggestions that, we can hear to the department, Congress I can't do anything about, but it'd still just be interesting to other folks to hear, what are some possible solutions to managing or reducing fractionation. So managing and reducing are, kind of two different things. We can manage them better. Like I said, there's technology. We can track them, and we can, know where everyone lives. We can send them a letter, and, hopefully they understand what they own and are involved. That's just, kind of taking care of it, but it's still there, still an issue. But then there's also reducing it. What can we do to consolidate those interests, outside of the program? Like I said, we're running out of money, and so we're not going to go everywhere, and we're going to just run out of money or time. And we'll see which one comes first. So just interested in hearing some feedback from you guys. We have about half an hour. We don't have to go that long if nobody wants to say anything, but I have some buyback pens. So if I do get some questions or comments, I don't think BIA employees are eligible to get a pen, but we would still love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Patty Olby. I'm the superintendent at Minnesota Agency, and I was involved with the Indian Land Consolidation Program, the pilot program before land buyback came in. That was active primarily in the Midwest, and I believe other places. I worked for the Midwest, but one of the things that I see that is helpful in this effort, not only acquiring and buying those land interests, but also informing the landowners. And I find that very helpful. We do workshops. We're having one in the Midwest on for landowners specifically, and of course, selling their interest is an option, but also talking about estate planning with them, and actually going back before that and talking to them. How did I acquire this? Why is it so fractionated? How did we get to where we are today, and how can I fix it? And presenting all those options, family land consolidation plans, selling, wills, gift conveyances, with life estates, just presenting all those options to landowners. And I always go back to presenting this information to my aunt, my Aunt Lorraine, who was a land owner, and she had no clue what I was talking about. And here, at the time, I was a realty officer. It's like, how the heck is this happening? Here's my auntie is a landowner and doesn't know what I'm talking about. So then I realized, well, maybe a lot of other landowners don't know what I'm talking about neither, and reaching out to them. And I think it makes our life, our work, so much busier, because each time we do an outreach or a workshop, because it does drum up business for the Bureau. A lot of people are gift conveying and whatnot, but it's good. It's good. We're working with family land consolidation plans and things like that. So I think just getting the information out there and informing landowners what their options are available to them and what it means to be a landowner. So the more information, I think information is key.
Thank you. So one thing the program stresses is landowner outreach and informed decision-making. So I think that's one of the big benefits, like she was saying, for the program, is that just people are becoming more aware of what they own. A lot of times it was, I own 0.0005, and I get, 1 cent a year, and maybe a check every 10 years, when it gets to the threshold. So, a lot of people just don't care. They're like, well, whatever. But it still affects, the land being idle, still affects the department. So it's definitely a good information that the landowners need to have and hopefully become involved, and, manage it for their benefit or their heirs' benefit or for their tribe's benefit. So thank you. have a question?
I think we kind of need to open up the dialogue about what's going to happen here. You're talking about everything kind of coming to a close because the funding and the time frame that the settlement had. And I think you guys, just hearing that you're calling it a success, you bought all these fractional interest, you decreased it or at least put a Band-Aid on the wound here. But I think we need to, ILCA and buyback are these Band-Aids. That's all they can be right now. And it's because of this short-term mentality we're having. We're not thinking long-term. And maybe education and estate planning can be part of it. But at the end of the day, it was Congress and the lack of probate laws that created this issue here. Mm-hmm. And you're asking these questions about 80, 90 years too late. That's the issue where this all sprouted out from, was the lack of probate and the lack of estate planning for Indian country. Mm-hmm. And I think talking about either extending, and it sounds like you guys kind of perfected this program, or you might have had some mistakes along the way, but you got to a point where it's easier for you to hit these land bases, these tribes, get in there, sign these cooperative agreements, get these mass appraisals done. So you got a good formula here. And I don't think this should go away, especially for the tribes that didn't get a chance to participate for a reason or another. You talked about this re-implementation strategy plan, that the new administration had. A lot of tribes were cut, including my tribe was cut from the program because the new administration came in and decided we don't want to go to the smaller land bases. We want to go back to the bigger land bases, which is okay. Wasn't much consultation there. I think we should have had some tribal outreach consultation for that decision rather than just a letter to our tribal leaders. But I think opening the discussion right now, since you're talking about this program coming to a close, about either funding this program more as a perpetual program to address this issue, or using the mechanisms that you guys have in place to address the purchases. The end of the day, it's going to come down to the funds. That's what it always comes down to. And to you and to a lot of people, these are numbers. The statistics are good. People like the numbers and everything. But the landowners, especially the ones that live on the tribal lands, they've been there for years. They have homes there. They have people. A lot of times they have people buried there. They're part of the land. You're saying, you're coming in and you're telling them, oh, you only own 0.000.6, 8, and 9% of this, but in reality, this person knows more about the land than, a lot of the tribal ownership. Just because we own more of the land doesn't mean they're not as connected to it. They lived on it all their life. It's their homestead. They have cultural doings on there. There's a certain respect that you got to have for even those fractionated owners that might not have so much interest, but have certain ties to the land that can't be described on a piece of paper. So, I think that right now, since we're just talking about it closing down and we're talking about it coming to an end, the discussion, and maybe you're talking about at a subcommittee, a Congress subcommittee meeting, or at a department level head meeting, but there needs to be some kind of push to either extend this or have additional funds allocated within the next fiscal years. I don't know if that would be this administration's goal, because it sounded like they wanted to use these funds as quick as they can by going back to the higher, the larger land bases. But so I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I'd like a pen, please.
Okay. Katie? Show them how to use it, Katie. They're really good pens. We only have 5 more. So ask your question quickly. Yeah. But I wanted to say, thank you for all that. That's good input. Where this came from was from Congress. So there was a lawsuit, and then there was a settlement agreement. I don't know who was involved, DOJ, Department, and Congress with the plaintiffs. It came from Congress. They said, here's the funds, go do this, and you have 10 years. And so I would encourage you to, talk to your representatives, Congress, senators, if that's something you think should happen, start having that discussion. We, as the department, we can't lobby Congress. But you as a citizen can certainly do that to your representatives. So thank you. Yeah, I think we're working on the mic here. Getting some battery, so hold on.
If I may add, it took a lawsuit, it's not like Congress all of a sudden woke up one day and decided that this needed to be funded. It took a lawsuit, and they were getting clobbered in the courts before this settlement was finally forged. But it took Indian country to start the process to get Congress to that point. It's,
You don't get a pen, Albert.
I think I'm where you're at here. I have a telecom with the Department of Interior coming up. I don't know the exact day because of the shutdown. So I was going to ask, okay, what do I put in their face? I mean, is it just the money, or how would you, if you were sitting in front of Bernhardt, is it? That's the latest one in there. How would you handle the question? How would you handle my discussion with him?
Well, definitely the managing the fractionation. I mean, that's all we can do now. So, like we were saying, we're running out of the funding to buy it. That you definitely have to go to Congress for that. Perhaps I don't know exactly how it works, but I know the department can't lobby Congress. But yeah, so managing it, like you were saying, there's processes that we put in place. The mass appraisals that have been happening, that's certainly something that the department is looking at and is, I think, actively trying to continue outside of buyback. But I think across the government, I don't know if you've seen the latest budget submission, but it's, let's cut, and so we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But, there are folks at the department that are interested in, figuring out how to manage this fractionation, how to, get these mass appraisals out so that people, maybe co-owners can do it, or tribes can purchase the fractional interest. The acquisitions, I don't know how many people have received an offer. So, drinks on you later? Okay. Well, I don't know if you sold or not, yeah, so just, getting the offers out, that's something that the program was able to do, in a large, sending out a large amount of offers at once. And so there's things like that, the acquisition, possibly some of the technology, the mapping that we were able to use for the mass appraisals. BIA is, definitely interested in continuing to use that. Those processes that were put into place. And so that's definitely happening. So, I guess I would just encourage, the department to continue to use those. And I think we do that. We try to tell them that these are important. Don't let these go away. So whether they listen to me, I don't know. We'll see. But thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say we really do appreciate, I'm Delano Sluiskin with Yakima Nation. We do appreciate being able to participate in the land buyback program, and it did, we were able to acquire a number of fractionated interests. And our tribe is still wanting to continue that process, and we have put together some financial resources so that we could, because even after the program closed, we have a number of tribal members, well over 200 right now, on the books wanting to sell their fractionated interest back to their tribe. And so we're trying to develop a process so that we could do that. And one of the strategies do your tribe use, manage, or reduce, we want to develop another phase of buyback. But at the same time, we're anticipating some difficulties. Number one, appraisals. To buy a less than, let's just say, a 1% interest back, do we have to go out and pay for another appraisal, or somehow or another can you have flexibility in your rules and your regulations to allow us to use some of the same appraisals that we used in the first time. So, I mean, that's a big concern of ours right now, is to whether or not, to make this successful, can we use those appraisals somehow, get an extension of those appraisals to allow us to do that? And I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that we face as we put this package together. So, you know, I'm hoping that the Bureau can allow flexibility to use the same mechanisms that was used in the land buyback to allow the tribe to implement our own land buyback using your same mechanisms and stuff. So, you know, I think that's going to be key for us to be able to do that. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. So that was one thing, two things, I guess, allowing us to use your processes and allowing us to use your appraisals. But I have I have kind of a question. All the lands that were purchased through the land buyback, I'm not sure that the LTRO records have been updated as a result of that. And I would hope somebody could address that. Has all the LTRO records been updated as a result of the land buyback as well? So those are just a couple of my thoughts right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the interest should, they should be transferred over, and then when you run a new, I guess, ITI for the tribe, it'll show those interests transferred. There's also some other report that, I think it's called a T37, that'll show you the interests that were purchased, the income report, and then it'll show you the new income coming to the tribe, eventually.
I just have a very general question. Is who currently in the BIA has the power of decision to make in regard of the future of the buyback program? What is the name of the person and where he is at or she is at?
Wait, say that
The
again?
power of decision for the future of the buyback program. In the structure of the BIA, who has that power of decision to say this is what is going to happen in the future?
Well, it's not at the BIA. So the buyback program is located in the office of the secretary. There's the Department of the Interior, and then there's the office of the secretary. Like along with OST, they're also just kind of separate offices. And then there's the bureaus, BIA, BLM, Forest Service, or not Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, National Park, these big bureaus. And so we're located in the office of the secretary. And then we have an oversight board that consists of, I think I know everyone, but the associate deputy director, our program director, or no, he's not on the board, right? Director of BIA, BLM director, I think the AVSO, Appraisal Valuation Services Office, solicitor. So there's a group of folks, Asia, the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, that are on that board that oversee the major decisions of how the program operates. So it's not just one person. And these people meet regularly to talk about the program.
But it's important to remember, too, that the buyback program itself is born from a court settlement. And so the court ordered the U.S. government, you shall put this program together, you're going to spend this much money getting it done. And now that those funds are done, it will be up to the leadership of the department at the highest levels and U.S. government, Congress and so forth, if and whenever they would allocate additional funds to maintain the program or some simile of the program into the future. The money, this $1.9 billion that we've been working on since 2012, that was from the court settlement. Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm also from one of those tribes that got pushed aside, kicked out, dumped, and pushed off the list. So, and we're kind of bitter about it, where I'm from, because it was not based on any tribal standards, as the gentleman said. It didn't have any parameters. It was a Dear John letter. We just got the Dear John letter, and says this administration's priority is to go back to the bigger tribes. It just happened to look like those tribes where the pipeline was going through, or near or by, or had something to do. That decision, I think, for this court case reflected what has caused this problem that we're in with this fractionation. We can't lose sight of the fact that the U.S. government created this problem through its policies and through its design. And then they turn around and they say, hey, Indians, you fix it. Hey, tribes, you come up with a solution. You do this. And all the solutions that include the tribes include us having to pay for their policies and their mistakes. That's what it is. So the land consolidation program was a loan that the tribes had to pay back. The first proposal for the buyback program was to put it in the land consolidation program and make us pay back loans. And the tribes rebelled and said, we're not going to do that, because this money is hard-earned sweat money that came to do this. And now what the government needs to do is provide the tribes with the resources, whether that mean appraisals, whether that mean money that each tribe can buy back in their programs that they want to set up. There has to be allocations, because the government needs to pay for them. They should have learned this from Cobell. That's what she was saying. You have to pay for your mismanagement. We didn't create this problem, because we have other ways of handling our land and inheritance. We need to be allowed to buy back non-Indian interests. We can't do that under this project, because a lot of our interests have gone. We also have, from where I'm at, we have non-reservation based allotments that are mostly owned by non-Indian people. So we need to be able to do that. And I don't think it's true that your department can't do something with Congress, because your program, as well as the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they can make recommendations, they can do findings, they can do reports, and they can submit it in their budget narrative. All of this information, that's their job, that's their responsibility. But to turn it over to the tribes and say, oops, we made a mistake, is going to make every tribe in here feel like I feel about you guys, not you personally, you probably weren't there, deserted us and dumped us with a letter. And we're saying, and right now, if you have any leftover money from these tribes, which you're hinting at, we already have a list of people that want to sell their interests. That money should be spent. And I'm kind of curious, because you said that your organization was going to choose those tribes that would be picked up at the end until we run out of the money. So I'm going to call those the blessed tribes. I want to know, how do you get blessed? Because I want to be blessed.
Yeah, so the letter she's mentioning, I think it went out somewhere in 2017 to the tribal leaders, Dear Tribal Leader letter, that talks about, why we went through these changes, what the focus is going to be going forward. I guess it was in July 2017. I think the letter is on our website, so if you're curious. Oh, it's not? Oh. Yeah, so there were 2 letters, a Federal Register notice, and a listening session that happened in that summer 2017. But the schedule, the one that I showed earlier, was based on a number of factors. This was from the letter: severity of fractionation, appraisal complexity, degree of ownership overlap between locations or geographic proximity, tribal readiness, pass response rate, and cost and efficiency. And so the direction from the department was maximize consolidation of fractional interest with the remaining fund. But, look at these things when you're looking at, how to put the schedule together. So that's the only answer I have. But thank you for the information. It's good. Anybody else? We have 2 more pens.
I'd like to address a question that was asked earlier.
Can you wait for the mic, Albert?
I think everybody can hear me well.
Well, it's for the recording, for the video.
I was talking with Eldred Lisansi, our former director of OAS, earlier, and I was discussing with him the fact that Umatilla was inquiring about updating the valuation model that we built for them last year, I think it was. And I made the comment to him that these models really need to be, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort and expense, quite frankly. Work and effort translates into dollars and cents. It takes a lot of time to build one of these models. It's a multi-month project, and there's a whole team involved in developing these models. But once they're done, right now we're doing it. They send us to this location, they send us to this location, they send us to this location, and we build a model. A model is nothing more than a mathematical algorithm that allows you to determine what the most likely value of the property is. In the case of Umatilla, when we developed that model for them last year, they came to the session, they stayed with us for the whole week, they were quite impressed, they were quite happy with the results. And now apparently they're inquiring as to whether or not that model can be updated. If this is going to stick, and it impacts all of Indian country, what I had mentioned to Eldred earlier this afternoon was, that model should be a regional model. It should be a model that accommodates not only Umatilla, but Warm Springs, Yakima, across the river, even Colville, Spokane. One model can accommodate that entire region. And these are the types of economies of scale that we need to find and build into these tools if these tools are gonna stick and have longevity. I quite frankly think that applying mass appraisal techniques as far as possible throughout Indian country is going to be a primary tool that is going to allow Indian country to avail themselves of these appraisals that they so desperately need. There is significant, I don't want to use that word lightly. There is significant costs to Indian country when they do not have access to this financial data now, when it's needed. And that's something that needs to be addressed. With today's technology, with today's tools, there's really no excuse. But it takes noise. It takes noise to make these things happen.
Thank you, Albert.
Good afternoon. I like to point out a couple of things. One has to do with the this mystery oversight committee that you mentioned, or oversight board that you have. They are very, very strict for the second go-around that we underwent. I wish they had some kind of an appeal process where administrative decisions are made and we could go to that mystery oversight committee. What are they afraid of? One of the things that was mentioned just now is, there are certain grievances that somebody needs to hear.
I think from a grievance process and for this oversight committee to be able to listen to, there could then be develop recommendations. I think that would be a good way of resolving certain of the issues, outstanding issues. I think even though the program has done very well, I think it's opening up a lot of other matters of concern. My name is Larry Rogers. I work with the Navajo Nation government. Within the Eastern Navajo Agency is one of 5 agencies. The entire Eastern Navajo is checkerboarded. The total agency area is roughly 5 million acres. And from the first buyback, we were able to benefit an equivalent to 155,000 acres, which sounds great statistically, as somebody might have mentioned. The Navajo Nation now is an allotment owner to over 2,000 allotments. Of that, 650 or so, the Navajo Nation has now controlling interest of 50% or more. 33 allotments were totally flipped, 100% sold. The problem with now at the stage of future land use is the ambiguity of regulation. Either BIA, I suppose, would be the one that needs to probably issue new policy on how tribes can access the sole equivalent acreage and so forth. I think that's very important. That should be a next immediate step. And if it's something that the grievance committee, I'm calling them a grievance committee. How's that? This committee or oversight board that you have, I'd like to see that tribes have an opportunity to access that board and be able to provide recommendations. It really is a federal problem that is trying to be resolved. But and if it's been here over 100 years, who's to say that it can't be, future improvements can't be done? Let's try and do it sooner than 100 years, but if we can keep the idea going of consolidating Indian land holdings, it's very much needed. If we can consolidate lands in Eastern Navajo, it would really resolve a great deal of jurisdictional issues. And that's one thing that tribes strive for, is to make sure that they're in control of its own resources and land use. Now, 155,000 acres sounds like a lot, but when it's spread over 5 million acres, it's not that meaningful in terms of potential land use, unless you strategically, have those lands that are situated near crossroads and so forth, can be used for certain community and economic development purposes. But anyway, just still, I think a great deal of concerns that we do have, and somehow there needs to be a continuous dialogue on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think we have 1 pen left.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Joseph, and I'm with the Sistanwafton Oyate tribe. And we were part of that, and we exceeded the dollar amount as far as, I think, Sistan got over 26 million. Well, going through that process, we had quite a few landowners, so over 31 million was paid out, which was fine. The couple of problems, that kind of, I don't know if anybody else experienced them or not, but we had siblings within the same tract. One got an offer, another one didn't. And I think the packaging of the envelope, your white package with the small lettering, I think that, probably should have been redesigned, because if we had known that earlier, we would have got the word out, put it on our radio, put it out on our little, native paper that, here's your land offer. So this is what it looks like, because the majority of the landowners are older people and everything. So now we have almost 700 that are willing landowners, but ours is come and gone. So now we're having to deal with, these almost 700 tribal members that want to sell their little fractionated interests. There's submitting land sale applications. Well, we, the tribe, we don't have that kind of money to buy all of those. So I guess my thought on that was, why did one sibling in the same tract get an offer and not the other? So I don't know how that happened. My only comment.
All right, thank you. I was going to say something about that. Well, I mean, that happens, like maybe one of the interests, maybe they're still a minor or non-compos mentis. We have eligibility criteria. So generally, we send offers to all the interest holders that are eligible on that tract. For the envelope, I think maybe back then, we did just have the plain white envelope, and I think people did make suggestions. I suggested a big $sign on the envelope, but now we have our emblem. I don't know if we have it on the presentation, but now it's, land buyback program, But people, I've heard people just still grab it and stick it to the side. It's just something from the government. Don't look at it. So that's an issue. But I think we're out of time. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I'll still be around after this for questions. But thank you.